Welcome to the IBMS Lothian and Borders podcast.
Is there enough bagpipe in that? Hello, my name is Mike Gray and I'd like to welcome you to the IBMS Lothian and Borders branch podcast. What's all this about, you might ask? Well, for those of you listening who don't know, the Institute of Biomedical Science, which is the professional body for biomedical scientists in the UK, has branches in all corners of the country, and in the southeast of Scotland, where Edinburgh and the Borders sit, we have a branch. So this podcast was an idea from the branch committee to look at, in the first instance, at career stories of biomedical scientists. Why career stories? There is a lot of information out there on how to get into biomedical science, and there are some podcasts that focus on scientific topics. But from a people perspective, we often get very useful talks from senior individuals in the profession. And as interesting as they are, the committee hit upon the idea of listening to all levels of staff involved in biomedical science with the aim of capturing the stories of professionals you might not necessarily hear from, and to look at all stages of the career ladder. So each story, we hope, will be inspirational. Each story will have a message, and if anything, will highlight the myriad of ways that people get into biomedical science. So if you like stories and finding out about people, then stick around. What could possibly go wrong? Hello. So this time I'm here with Mairiead MacLennan, and I'm going to hand over to Mairiead to tell you who she is and where she is at the moment. Mairiead.
Hi. Yeah, I'm celebrating this week because it's 50 years since
way.
50 years since I went to work as a med lab technician A in Perth Royal Infirmary.
50 years this
50
week.
years this week. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So the whole point of our podcast here is to talk about folks' career stories. So I think we're going to get a cracker tonight. And the if anybody's been listening to this series, we've done three relatively, and I'm going to use this word advisedly, Mairiead, junior members of staff. And now we're getting to the legend end, aren't we?
We are indeed. Yes.
We are indeed.
Or as my colleague was called the other day, a leg end.
Yeah, because for the listeners out there, if you're listening to this, Mairiead really is one of the massive personalities in microbiology in Scotland, and it's a bit of an honour actually to get you to do this.
I wouldn't have said an honour, Mike, because both you and I are pretty good at bumping our gums. And we can have a good old chat.
I suppose. Right, okay. So that's all that out of the way.
Yeah.
Right, so let's go back in the TARDIS 50 years plus ago. And I guess the idea here is at one point you were 50 plus years younger and you made choices and decisions about what you were going to do with your career or with a career. So if you go right back to the earliest memory you've got of why you wanted to do what you do.
I remember it vividly, and I don't forget it because in my career I've come across people that are actually not enjoying what they do, and I realise I actually feel very sorry for them because I was walking up to the bus from school, and because I lived out in the country, we had to leg it up to the bus in a hurry or you missed it home, and then that was you stranded. And I remember vividly my pals were talking about what we wanted to do when we grew up, and somebody had this book of careers.
Okay.
And I found very quickly in it the job of lab technician.
Okay.
And I thought, that's exactly what I want to do.
And
I have never changed my mind.
But how did you come to that conclusion at such an early age?
I loved science. I loved biology. I recognised pretty quick I did not like physics very much. My physics teacher saw me as a great disappointment in a grammar school. I wasn't terribly great at maths. I could do arithmetic. I could count. But they did actually ask me to not set my maths higher so as I wouldn't bring the pass mark down in the grammar school.
So this was, where was grammar school?
It was Perth Academy.
Oh, right, okay. So have you, because you're at Fife at the moment, have you always lived? Have you always lived and been brought up in that area?
I was born and brought up in Perthshire on a farm, and I lived in that area until I got married, had both my kids, and my parents had actually moved. Just about that time, I was deciding I wanted to be a lab technician. They had sold the farm and they'd actually moved to Orkney.
Right.
And the plan was I would finish school and follow them. And then when I started to look at this job as a lab technician and careers around that, I realised that I wasn't going to further, Orkney, I wasn't going to further my career at all if I went to Orkney. I was going to have to leave Orkney, move to Orkney, leave Orkney and go to somewhere like Aberdeen to study.
Of course.
So I didn't go. So it caused a bit of a stooshy because I was only 16.
Really?
So my home had left me and I decided not to follow.
Wow. Did you stay in a tent in a field? Or did you, I mean...
Well, that was...
So mum and dad went, bye, I'm off to Orkney.
Yeah, and I said, bye, I'm not coming with you. And I stayed in a flat in the village that I was born and brought up in.
Wow.
And
at 16?
At 16 and got myself a job. And the rest is history. So that was how it happened. I decided not to move.
Okay. But clearly you'd left school with some level of qualification.
I was a bit of a disappointment to my teachers, and that's why I can say to people that I come across in our job, I didn't really enjoy the last few years in school. I flew through O grades, got fantastic results, and I think just the kind of way school went in the 70s, I did not sit well with it. So I kind of understand the neurodiversity word now. I didn't get it back then, but it just didn't suit me. And my teachers kind of saw me as a disappointment, and that did not sit well with me. So I couldn't wait to get out of school and get into the working world and earn a living. That was my approach. Okay. And I didn't understand this process of I was in a grammar school, all of my peers were going off to university and doing things like that. I didn't understand that process, and neither actually did my parents.
Right. When you say you didn't understand that process, did you understand, was it the process you didn't understand, or was it the concept of going to university you thought that was a bit alien?
I didn't. It was, nobody had gone to university in my family, and my parents didn't understand how to initiate that process.
Right, okay.
And I didn't understand it either, but I just was fed up with study, which is hilarious, which is really funny when I look back at my career.
As we will uncover.
Yes.
Right, okay. So you're sitting in your flat, you're 16, in Perth. What were the first steps in getting your first job? Did you see an advert, or was it word of mouth, or what?
Actually, it was, I left school, went to work in a children's home as a carer, and came across an advert in the PA Pershire Advertiser.
Aye, the Advertiser.
A good old Advertiser. And I phoned up about it and I went for an interview. And it was a completely different situation than what young people face now. And I basically went up and met these people and they said, right, you start on the 9th of September, and this was in the July or something. But, oh, by the way, you have to go. And I thought, that's great, I've got a job. Oh, but you have to go to classes.
Oh.
And I went, what?
I'm done with studying.
Bit of a shock.
Oh, dear. Right, okay.
Yes. So it was then I was told I had to turn up at the station. I had to go to classes for a couple of weeks because term had started and the job didn't start into November. So I had to go to classes for a couple of day release days before I actually started the job. And I had no idea what I was doing. So I got the bus and turned up at the train station. And they thankfully had arranged for one of the other girls that was going to classes to meet me, to take me by the hand, which was a good job because I'd never, ever been on a train to Dundee in my cream puff.
Right, okay.
Led a sheltered life.
So I've got flashbacks with some of my own experiences, but I'm not going to go into it. But yeah, I can imagine you standing at the train station going, what am I doing here? And,
yes.
And somebody turns up and says, we go on this train now. So you go to Dundee, and that was for classes in what?
MedLab Technology at Kingsway Tech.
Right, okay.
Kingsway Technical College. You went for 2 years and did the general, ONC, and I actually really enjoyed it. It was right. Good.
If we go back,
studying things I was interested in.
Oh, right, okay. If we go back to the advert, though, so was the advert for a job in a medical laboratory, or was it an advert for a job somewhere else?
It was a job.
Perth
in
Royal Infirmary.
Perth Royal Infirmary,
Okay.
Laboratory, and yeah, it's still the same building. It's still there.
Right. Wow.
But it's an annex to Nine Wells, of course, now. But Nine Wells was still just being built.
Right. Okay.
When I was going to Kingsway Tech.
Okay. Did Dundee have a hospital? Sorry, I should know this.
Yes. Well, they did. They had, I think they had Dundee Royal Infirmary, and then they had one of those hospitals that had been like the exclusion hospital. I think it was called St. Mary's or something.
Right,
and they
okay.
closed Dundee Royal Infirmary and these other hospitals and all went to Nine Wells about 1974.
Okay. So
the official opening.
Right, okay. So the job that you were in while you were studying at Perth Royal, so that was called a what?
That was a medical laboratory technician.
Oh.
A.
I mean, that's even before medical laboratory scientific officer.
Oh, I've been them all. I've been a med lab technician A, a medical laboratory technician B. So that's when you get your ONC and study for your HNC. And just about that time, the name was changed to MLSO, as we were known as, Medical Laboratory Scientific Officers. What a mouthful.
Wow. And the registration process at that time, can you remember what that was like?
Yeah, that was when you got your HNC, which by that time, so the ONC was a general, all subject that you studied, multidisciplinary. Then you had to specialise.
Okay.
And I wanted to specialise in microbiology. However, my boss took me aside and said, but all three of you want to do, there were 6 of us going to classes at that time, out of, not a huge staff, 6 of us going to classes, day release, 3 one day and 3 another day. And the other 2 that wanted to do microbiology did it on the other day. And I was taken aside and told, you've got good marks in all of the subjects except biochemistry. Well, that's never changed. And you've got good marks in all of the subjects. So you're going to have to do histopathology and cytology because 2 others want to do microbiology and they don't have good marks in anything else.
Right. So was it a gladiatorial fight in the outside in the car park to decide who did what?
I didn't get a choice. I was just told that was what would happen.
Right. Okay. So this is getting interesting. So at this point, you're going to be a histopathologist.
Yeah, and that's what happened. So I had to study my HNC in histopathology and cytology.
You're telling me one of the legends of Scottish microbiology started off as a histopathology technician, right? Okay.
And I specialised in cytoscreening.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Right. Okay. So clearly, at this point, I mean, I think if anybody's listening to this, if anybody's braved these podcasts, they found out that I'm an ex-bacteriologist. I still am technically. So clearly, you still had a passion for microbiology. You're sitting in a histopathology laboratory, which is a lovely discipline to be in, but it doesn't suit everybody.
No, that's true.
And you're sitting cutting sections, and one day something sparks in your head that says, I really want to go back to that microbiology thing. So how did that happen?
Well, that was a big leap and quite a bendy road. After I was qualified and I worked for a couple of years, I also forgot to say that I did get married very young as well.
Right. Okay.
And so I was married at 17. And
you were packing quite a lot of stuff in between 16, 17, 18. You were going for it.
Proper activist. So what happened was I then did what many of us did at that time, got qualified, worked for a bit and decided I wanted to start a family.
Okay.
So I did that, but in those days, it was very different. Now, there is a wee story I will tell you about in a minute. But at that stage, the pregnancy tests were done in haematology.
Yes.
And I had circulated around all the departments. That's what you did. So I was truly multidisciplinary. And that stood me in good stead in years to come. Anyway, there was a wee bit of a habit if the senior chief spotted certain pregnancy tests, it wasn't long before they were asking you when you were resigning, because the rules and regulations were different in those days.
And was that an actual thing?
That was a thing.
Wow.
That happened. Even they waited until your booking bloods came in from the antenatal clinic, and so it was kind of out there. Now, of course, this kind of practice would never happen nowadays because people know, if things were spotted, you don't mention it.
Yes,
but back in those days, a long time ago, people just mentioned it to you. And so it was mentioned to me that as soon as I knew when I was going to be resigning, I should let them know, because there was a queue of wonderful people waiting to take your job.
Oh dear. I mean, for anybody listening, we've got to point out that this was in the
70s.
Was it mid-70s?
Late 70s.
Late 70s. And a lot has changed since then.
Well, in 1976, the Sex Equality Act came out.
Right.
And I was one of those, as you will no doubt not be surprised. I was banging the drum for equality in the mid-70s. And when that, was official, I I didn't make the tea on the Wednesday that I was supposed to.
What, you're leaving tea?
No, I didn't make the tea for everybody.
Oh, you didn't make the tea? Oh, sorry, they weren't going to have a leaving party for you.
That was later, back in 76,
right,
when the Equality Act came out. On the day, it was my day to make the tea for everyone.
Yes.
Yeah, there was a rota, and the girls all had to make the tea. But I'd calculated that since we were now all equal, the boys should have been making the tea as well.
Yes.
And 2 boys and 3 girls had started after me.
Right.
So if you counted the 2 boys, I shouldn't have to make the tea. So I just didn't. And Third World War nearly broke out, and I got a right.
Okay.
Because I hadn't made the tea. And so I said to them, well, you know, X and Y, or Y and Y, had started after me. So really, the law says I should be off the rota. I thought I was going to get my daughters. It maybe wasn't the best way to do it.
Okay.
But I didn't make the tea again.
So around about this time, of course, you're pregnant.
Actually, it was a couple of years after that. That was earlier. That was quite early on.
But in this whole scenario, there's a number of things happening, isn't there?
Yeah.
There's like, you're pregnant, right? You lose your job. You're a girl, so you should be making the tea. Yes. Mm-hmm. I mean, anybody listening to this now thinks, oh, my goodness, what on earth did these older people go through?
I know.
So, right, okay, so back to the story about, so the desire to do microbiology
came after. Mm-hmm.
Came after. So, did you go ahead and have your family?
Yes, I had my 2 kids, and when the second one was barely a year old, my old boss phoned me up and said, right, that's it. This is the situation. Would you like to come back to work? Which was kind of unheard of. We're now in 84. Kind of, oh, wow. And I said, well, I would, but my house is up for sale and I'm moving to Caithness.
Right, okay.
So we decided we would move because my parents had come back from Orkney back to the mainland, and we had 2 kids, and we felt that we were too far away and we needed to be nearer them for my children to know their grandparents, basically. So we moved to Caithness, and I was bored. So I started up a business and did a few other things.
Okay.
And
so what was the business?
I had a cottage industry knitting exclusive jumpers for public school boys.
Okay. That's a good use of your, at the time, state registration, yes?
Yes. But I wasn't daft. Actually, and this is something I'm forever grateful for, there was an option to be like a retired member. Although we were broke, we didn't have much money. I maintained my registration.
Excellent. Yep.
And I was so glad about that, because that featured in my future quite significantly.
So at this point, you're making jumpers for public school boys.
Yes.
The microbiology story hasn't finished yet. You're up in Caithness.
Yeah.
You've stayed on the register, and that's, by the way, listeners, that's good advice. If you're going to take a career break,
always pay.
Always carry on.
Find the money.
Yeah. And then the next step was?
I needed to be back at working, not just doing this. And so I saw an advert for a job as an assistant scientific officer in the vet lab in Thurso.
Right, okay. Caithness and Thurso for the geographically challenged of Scotland.
It's just before you fall in the Pentland Firth. in the north of Scotland.
Okay, so but how far away are Thurso and Caithness?
Right, Caithness, the county, Thurso and Wick are the two towns in Caithness. And from here,
Yeah.
it's from Fife, it's a 5-hour drive.
Right. I'm from Borders, so why would I know
Right,
anything
well,
about you exactly?
How would you?
How would I?
My geography below the borders is terrible. So there you go.
Okay, so it wasn't a big commute to the vet lab.
No, it was about what I do here, about 8 or 10 miles.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay. Right. So this was sorry, you said an assistant
Scientific officer is what,
in the vet
what
lab.
they call.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So, and you applied for, was that through the Caithness advertiser?
Yes, always the advertiser, the local rag,
Brilliant.
or the John O'Groat Journal.
Okay.
There's a paper to be remembered.
And this was this a general veterinary lab?
It was the tiniest vet lab in the archipelago of veterinary laboratories that was at that time, because it went through several iterations while I worked for them. It was the East of Scotland College of Agriculture.
Okay, yeah.
And the North of Scotland College of Agriculture and the West of Scotland College of Agriculture, and they all came together. I joined in 1987, and it was the NOSCA, North of Scotland College of Agriculture Vet Lab. And within a year, they had amalgamated them all to become Scottish Agricultural College, otherwise known as SAC Veterinary Services.
And yes, I remember the name.
Yes, and they've reinvented themselves now as Scotland Rural University College, SRUC,
right.
Since I've left.
And is that a faculty of the Highlands and Islands universities?
It is yes, there is part of it is University of the Highlands and Islands, yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. Wow. Right. Okay. So you're there.
I'm there.
And
tiny team.
Tiny team. And do you start to specialise in microbiology?
Actually, it was brilliant because the job was multidisciplinary, and I'd had that background training as a multidisciplinary MLSO, and but it was amazing because now you're dealing with not one species but several species. Did you know that hens have got nucleated red blood cells? It was amazing.
I didn't, but I do now.
So now you can't count them on flow cytometry.
All right. So you had to use a Neurenbauer counting chamber.
That's right. You had to do it all manually.
Wow.
And the first thing they taught you was how to do worm egg counts on feces, because of course it's very important that you know what worm burden your animals have got.
Okay.
But it was mostly cattle, sheep, a few horses, and a few cats and dogs and pigs.
Okay. So you're in the vet lab. You're getting back into microbiology.
Yep.
You're up in Caithness.
Yep.
The next stage is, how do you get? What's the story between
there and there?
Back to the NHS, or back to human medical laboratories, and where you were? Right.
What actually happened next was, quite quickly I recognised through looking at what the IBMS was doing, things were changing. And that was the time, Mike, you'll remember very well, when degree entry came into the profession. And I looked around because I recognised that an HNC wasn't going to cut it in the future if I wanted to progress my career. So I started looking around, and that's when I wrote my first article in the Gazette in 1992, the lack of educational opportunities for MLSOs in Scotland. And it got published, and I was absolutely stunned. And basically pointing out that unless you worked in the Central Belt, in a hospital in the Central Belt, you had no access to to the learning to develop your career. So I ended up, I knew I had to upgrade my HNC, so I ended up travelling had 2 kids at school and a husband at that time, and I travelled from Caithness to Inverness and flew from Inverness to Heathrow and took a 2-hour bus drive to Bristol to go to the University of the West of England for a year to upgrade to my BSc in biomedical science.
So you went to Bristol for a year?
Well, what they offered was distance learning.
Okay.
That's what you had to do. So you packed into 3 packages, and there's a friend who works.
Oh, so you brought stuff back? Is it?
Yeah.
All right. So you basically took a suitcase to Bristol, and they put
for 2 weeks.
Studied for 2 weeks, put the stuff in a suitcase, and then got the reverse journey.
Yeah.
Wow. Never.
Now, there's somebody in NHS
sorry, just for the listener, this is before the internet existed.
Oh, yes.
Right. This is what you had to do.
Yeah.
That's dedication for you. Carry on.
Research and documents and finding papers was a nightmare. And so I did that for a year, along with somebody who I ran into many years later and recognised, who works in NHS Lothian.
Right.
And we pitched up there together with a crowd of Irish girls as well. And we did enjoy it. But we studied like mad. And it wasn't like a 22 hours, at university. It was, you did your 37 and a half hours or whatever it was, pure study and attendance at classes. And I recognised then I was not good at studying. I did not have that process licked. So that's one of the things that I've carried with me into being a training manager, is that understanding that people just don't all study the same way.
Totally.
And I found myself sitting sobbing my eyes out at the age of 35 going, why am I doing this, to the tutor? And I could see him thinking, what have I got in my hands here? Anyway, at the end of that year, I had a distinction, and excellent. I couldn't believe it. But I was so relieved to get that passed. But I wasn't quite finished when a job came up in Aberdeen, and I didn't tell anybody, and I went for it. And I didn't tell MD at work.
Yeah, I'm presuming you told your family.
I did.
Okay.
I did. Okay. That was a moment.
Okay.
And so I was an assistant scientific officer, and the next stage up was scientific officer, and then there was higher scientific officer. Mm-hmm. And higher scientific officer had responsibility for a department. And there was one in Aberdeen, and I went for it. And it was a bit cheeky, but I was a bit miffed that they'd started me at the bottom. You're getting a trend here. I'd started at the bottom of the pay scale.
Did you write a letter?
I was close. I had once said to he visited, I'm standing in the Thurso Vet Lab making a smoothie for worm egg counts, and the director of the whole of SAC came to visit, and I took my opportunity then to say it's not very fair that I didn't get credit for the years I spent in the NHS, and I started on the bottom of the pay scale, and you put another pay scale on the top and took one off the bottom, and I'm doing all this saying, so effectively I stayed at the bottom of the salary range for 3 years. Mm-hmm. You know what he said to me?
What?
Life is not fair, my dear. And I thought, you know what? I'm never going to forget that. You're right.
It's not fair.
It's not fair.
It's not fair. So to counteract the not fairness. Yeah, go on. To counteract the not fairness.
I applied for a job that was 2 grades, not 1 grade up from where I was.
Okay.
2 grades up.
And clearly you got that.
I did.
Right.
I was stunned. So was my husband. I will say ex because we're not now married. But, oh my goodness, I couldn't believe it. And I thought, what's going to happen? We moved. I took the job and he got a job in Aberdeen and we moved. And it was a great opportunity. And in that time that I was with SAC, I got some fantastic opportunities. But it's a two-way thing. You've got to get opportunities, but you've also got to take them.
Yeah.
And, unless that fire in your belly isn't indigestion, you've really got to go after it. And I think that we have to bring to this profession that fact. Life is not fair. You see what you want, you go after it in the nicest possible way. I mean, I don't believe in stepping over MD to get up the ladder. I don't believe in that. I kind of believe in leaving the ladder there. I saw with politics and with the first female prime minister, there was a change in society. And it was kind of, once you got up the ladder, you pull it up behind you so nobody can follow. And I don't believe in that. I believe in making sure that you give somebody the leg up you didn't get in your career.
Of course. Yeah. So
in Aberdeen, in SAC, I had 3 promotions. I went from an HSO to a regional supervisor and then to a functional manager. So for those listening, by the time came for me to leave SAC, I was operating as the quality manager for all 8 labs in Scotland. My portfolio include training and education for all of the staff that worked in these labs. And I had environment in my portfolio.
Okay.
And I had procured incinerators. Bear in mind, we'd gone through BSE, which was traumatic. And so I had actually gone out and bought incinerators on behalf of SAC. And I knew how to change the probe, but they wouldn't let me learn how to drive the forklift truck.
No,
I was very annoyed about that.
Okay.
They wouldn't let me. I wanted to.
So when you got to those heights, you must have started a thought process then about how do I go back to the NHS?
In the process of working in SAC, as I said, I got great opportunities. I had a fantastic line manager and I believed in doing a course, at least one a year. You have to better yourself. And then I fell upon something in microbiology because my brother was a pig farmer, and I identified a very unusual bacterium, which resulted in me writing a paper in 1997.
Okay.
And I then wrote a research project for our lab and earned 50,000 for our lab to research Streptococcus suis. And a very close friend of mine who worked in the NHS and had set up the Campylobacter reference laboratory at Forester Hill. Sadly, now she's passed away. She said to me, you should write that and you'll get something from it. Don't just do it. And it was going to be an MPhil. It ended up being a PhD. So I wrote a PhD off the back of that research project.
Wow.
And whilst working full time and having a family, as you do.
Yes.
As you do. And lots of people do it.
How long did it take you to do your PhD?
Mike, am holding the absolute record. It took 9 years. And
Is that a record? Is that a record? I don't know.
Oh my God. Yes. A friend of mine said, I thought I had the record at 7. I actually, it won't be a surprise, and I'm not embarrassed to say, I crashed and burned in the middle of that, and I took 2 years out of study.
Yeah.
I was off work for about 12 or 14 weeks. That gives me good insight. It's a great experience. All your life's experiences should be added to your satchel to take forward. You don't carry it as baggage. You take it forward as experience. And so I can talk to people that have gone through experiences like that, because I get what they're going through. I can't know what they're doing, but I know what kind of things happen during that process.
But you've got a fair degree of empathy there for people in study in distress, I guess.
Yeah. It was pretty rough. I
can imagine.
But the other thing as well is that, it's never one thing. It's a 3-legged stool. You can cope if one thing's bad and the other 2 are okay.
Yeah.
It's when all 3 get you that you fall over, and then you just have to. It is what they say. Keep calm and carry on. Pick yourself up and walk.
Okay.
And that's what you do.
So after doing all of that, you must have thought, I'm trying to figure out when you went back to the NHS, because I only know you from the NHS.
Yeah, it was 2010. I'd done, by this time, we'd been working on SOPs, and we'd gone through UCAS, group accreditation, all 8 labs. We were just rolling out to the last couple.
So how long overall was the veterinary laboratory career?
It was close to 25 years.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
And I mean, at the end, basically, you there was nowhere else for you to go, was there?
Well, there could have been, but as always in life, there's a reason, and you recognise that things have to change in life. And I had a cataclysmic event, and I knew that I couldn't maintain. I mean, this job was, at your level, it was 8C level. I was travelling the country. It was exhausting, but when something happens in your personal life, keeping going with that becomes harder. Yeah. And I knew that I couldn't keep this job going and face what I was going to have to go through. So I decided to cut all ties and move.
Okay.
And a job came up which I knew that was well within my capability, even if I wasn't functioning at all 4 cylinders. I could hang on in there. And I was very lucky because it fed both of my real interests, quality and training.
Okay.
So the quality and training manager in microbiology in Fife came up, and I applied. And I remember my pal Jeanette going, "What on earth do you want to come and get this job for? You could be working in Edinburgh." And
you don't want to work there.
And I said, that was actually what Jeanette. That's
Lovely.
What Jeanette said. Yeah. And I said, well, I've worked in small labs, and my relationship with people are important that I work with. And I was, the truth was, I was too scared to go to a big environment at that point. And I just said in the interview, I really wanted to work in a lab where I could have meaningful relationships, working relationships with everybody in the department.
Yeah,
because that was quite important to me.
Yeah, of course, you'd kept your registration going all the way through
all through veterinary medicine. Yeah, and I was
so that
you didn't have to be registered in veterinary medicine, but I kept that going. And so when the time came, I had the certificate of extended practice in quality under my belt, had the certificate of extended practice in training under my belt.
Absolutely.
And so I was able, because the NHS was scared of us.
Right,
in
okay.
veterinary medicine. They didn't see, generally, it's hard for them to understand the transformational skills that you can bring to the job,
Yes.
because you're not doing human medicine. But I was able to persuade them.
Was going back to human microbiology a stretch?
No, it was brilliant. It was just like coming home. That
Of course.
That was how I felt. I
Yeah.
felt very comfortable.
I mean, Staph aureus is still Staph aureus, you know.
It doesn't matter where it comes from.
Yes.
Your nose or your dog's nose.
Exactly.
There are one or two differences, but it's slightly more exotic. I mean, swabs from a tortoise or a snake, or and I'm extremely familiar with Salmonella Arizona, when you might not see that. Streptococcus suis, I had 1,000 isolates in deep storage in the vet lab that I had studied, and I just so wanted to put them through the Moldy-Toff when we got it.
Or get them sequenced these days.
Well,
can you imagine?
Somebody sequenced it just after I finished my PhD.
Oh, right. Okay.
But I was finished. It was molecular characterization of strep suis in diseased pigs.
Anyway, we need to stay on target.
Yeah.
Right. So you're back in the NHS.
I am.
You're back in the NHS. And is that the same job that you've done now until here? Yes.
Yeah. There was. I have applied, and this is where I want to say to people that I took it as a reflection on myself that I didn't get the jobs that I applied for.
Okay.
While I was sitting in this 8A position, and it is what people are looking for, and you may not always be the fit that they're looking for.
Yes.
And I have to admit that I don't fit the typical profile. I'm a bit gobby, and I didn't learn soon enough in life that that's maybe not what people want to hear. But I'm now at the stage it doesn't matter.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think we share some of those characteristics.
I agree.
Yes. So, and I guess because I do know from experience, towards the end of all of this, of course, you've been acting up.
Yeah.
And you've been managing much more extensively at Fife for a period, haven't you? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's right. It was an opportunity that I was asked if I wanted. And I asked my two colleagues if they would not rather have it themselves. And both of them went, no chance. And in fairness, we did think that we would manage to get backfill. But as you know, that's not been very easy for people working in the LIMS project. But it was a chance to stretch my legs again back in what I'd been doing previously.
Exactly. I was going to say there's a direct correlation there, isn't there, because you've held an extraordinarily senior position in the veterinary service.
Yeah.
You've been managing people and resources and all of the things that managers do.
Yeah.
So you're already sitting there with a skill set.
Yeah. And it was good, and I enjoyed it, and I hoped that it was going to provide the support to the team that we all needed during that time. And so there was no chance when we weren't in a place, we weren't ready last year when I should have retired. We weren't ready. And so I didn't, I wasn't ready myself. You have to be in the mindset. You have to be in the frame. And then we went live in February, and I thought, yeah, that's it. We're ready to do it now. But I still had a transition to 2022 to do.
Right, okay. That, for the uninitiated out there, that's ISO 15189 edition 2022 which
Yes.
medical laboratories in the UK are currently going through the transition process for.
Yes. And along the way, I'd also joined up with UCAS. I had experience for 10 years of ISO 17025 in vet lab. And then, in fact, the boss that recruited me actually said, one of the reasons we wanted you was because you had experience of UCAS, and we were all transitioning from CPA to ISO 15189 back in those days, 10 years ago. So I had one more target. Well, I had 3 targets. I had 3 objectives when I decided in April that it was time to go.
Right. Okay.
And that was, we had been planning since our former head of department had left 3 years ago. We'd been planning enteric PCR. We wanted to bring that in.
Now you've got it.
Now we've got it. Woohoo! Tick. Started this week. We had to transition successfully to ISO 5189 2022. We had our part of our assessment last week. 6 findings, gung-ho. And we have one more thing that we have to do. And I'm not going to jinx it. So we just have to hope that we can get that done before October the 31st.
Excellent. I've got 3 final questions for you.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna. So what I've been traditionally, well, there's 4 if you count the 4th one. Sorry, I've been asking people, are there any funny stories? But I'm not gonna, right? Because I've got 3 important questions for you.
Good.
Because you're at the stage where really, and I don't mean this lightly, Mairiead, everything that you say counts, right? All of your words have an impact on others. Given the longevity of your career and given the experience that you've managed to accumulate. Right, let's go. The IBMS. Any wise words for the IBMS? Now, bear in mind, we have to be nice about them because this is an IBMS. No, I'm only joking.
No.
Any wise words for the IBMS as you transition out?
Yeah. I am still sitting on the IBMS Special Advisory Panel for Quality.
Okay.
I'm not giving that up. I'm only retiring from the NHS. I'm not giving that up until I've worked out my period of time on it, which will take me through past Congress next year.
Right, okay.
And I'll still be banging the drum. And so, like most things I've done, I've joined because you can't change from the outside. You can only change from the inside.
Mm-hmm.
And understand what everybody's doing, where they're coming from, and hear what their vision is and align to that, but make them bend round the curve. We need not to be a region. We need to be a country.
Yeah.
And I understand that.
I agree. You're going to continue on with your IBMS activities beyond retirement, yes?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Right. Now we're getting to the crux of it. Listen, have you got any regrets?
Never have regrets.
Oh, what a brilliant answer. That's a classic. Right. And the last one is for anybody that's starting their career, because bear in mind, all I've interviewed so far are people who are starting or just into it and are about to take their flying journey, just like you have. Any words of advice?
I think I said them already. If you have a plan, you stick with that plan. Hold fast to your plan. And always remember to listen. And whoever you are listening to will also listen to you. So stick with your plan and see that fire in your belly, keep feeding it.
Great advice. just before you go then, you can do a self-advert for what you're going to do afterwards if you want to, right? Because I believe you might have some plans.
I do.
You don't have to talk about them now.
No, that's okay. Just very briefly, I set up a consultancy myself in 2020 and thought, oh, well, that business is going to go down the shuck when COVID hit. But actually, I work for UCAS as a technical assessor.
Right, okay.
And I assess. I also have started helping UCAS train assessors because I agree about what people say. We need consistency between assessors. And so, like I said, there's only one way to change things, and that's from inside.
And I think I can't think of anybody better to pass their experience on.
Well, thanks very much. I enjoy tutoring. I do tutoring with UHI, and I like to see people do the best they can do. And I really mean that.
And with that and all those wise words, thanks very much, Mairiead MacLennan. Sorry, Dr. Mairiead MacLennan. Only took her 9 years, but there she is. We wish you all the very, very best for the future. I'm sure we'll be in touch out there, and we will meet because you'll be involved in some of the activities with the IBMS. But it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for taking time to chat and tell us your story.
My pleasure, Mike. Thanks very much.